God is the ultimate universal in that he is the only thing that is ultimate, absolute, and he is the source and basis of why anything exists at all, because he brings this world into existence and he sustains it. So God's the ultimate universal. So you lack belief in that, then you're going to be believing in some other metaphysical universal, or the person will deny that, and then they're in a whole heap of trouble. Actually, either way, they're in a heap of trouble. It's because if they either affirm there's another universal that is not God, or they say, well, I don't see a need for a universal, good, then you have no facts. And they're shocked over this. What are you talking about? I have facts. You know, I go to work, I pay my bills, I pet my dog. Yeah. Say, can you have a fact without context? And then you're going to hear a pause. Very few of them answer right away because they realize, uh-oh, how do I answer this? What if I answer this way or that way? What's he going to hit me with? Now, they think they have context, but they're uneasy. Well, wait a minute, maybe I don't. The fact that we give several contextual layers of explanation for a given fact, that doesn't mean that you have final and ultimate context. Wherever you stop your outermost contextual explanation of any given fact, if it is not designated as the final universal, if it's not designated as ultimate and the source of all possibility, then you end up with no context at all. All you have is just alleged interconnected related facts that terminate in a context that is unknown.
I see.
So you always have to keep in mind, when we believe in God, we believe in the God of the Bible. Always, 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 always keep in mind the Christian worldview. Every single time you're listening to them, always compare and contrast moment by moment. How does that square with what God has revealed? How does that square with what God has said? Okay? Over and over again, we have, like, for example, the first verse in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay? Well, that means that he's the quintessential ultimate. He's the quintessential absolute. Everything that exists derives and depends upon him, and without him, it wouldn't exist, right? But then we go all the way to the end of the Bible, in the very last chapter, with the glorification of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, for those of us who believe, and he says, I am the Alpha and the Omega. That term is all-encompassing, means he's the ultimate, and we're all creatures. And he's the creator. So the Bible opens with God as the Alpha and the Omega, but it expresses it differently. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And it closes with the Lord of creation, Jesus Christ. I am the Alpha and the Omega. So you keep that in mind. So when the atheists come along and say, well, I lack belief in that. Okay, good. Then how does anything else make sense? Because you see, for the Christian, if I'm holding the ballpoint pen in my left hand, okay, this ballpoint pen is not self-existent. It always exists within the context of God creating this world. But if you lack belief in God, what's the context for this pen? What are you going to say? Your room? Well, has your room always existed? Say, well, no. Say, well, the house. Well, has the house always been there? Say, the universe. And they go, oh, well, the universe is eternal. I said, really? Are you eternal? No. So if you're not eternal, how do you know the universe is eternal? You see, whatever they put forth to replace God will simply be a product of their imagination. It's going to be a concoction of human idolatry. Okay? And if it's idolatrous, it can never be defended. So when they tell you, or how about this one? We had a guy in here earlier today, right? Said, oh, tell us about your atheism. He goes, yeah, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. Okay. Why not? There's no evidence for God. Really? No evidence for God? Yep. I said, when you state that there's no evidence for God, is that the equivalent of saying that all the facts that you are acquainted with do not necessitate referencing God? He goes, I just don't care. I said, you know why you just said that you don't care? It's because you're afraid to answer the question. Because once we understand, when you say that there's no evidence for God, you have to defend that statement. There's no shifting a burden of proof here. If you've determined that all the facts around you can be invoked as actual and intelligible without referencing the necessity of God, I want to know how you arrived at that. You know what they do? It never fails. They go, well, nobody has presented any evidence to me that there is. And I said, you've just reformulated the same claim and did it in different words.
You know, what you just said actually led me to another question I've also had. So how is it not shifting the burden of proof when it comes to God? I guess in other words, how is it
because nobody's neutral. That's why. Okay. It's not a shifting a burden of proof. All right. Now we can present that God exists and our reason why, but the moment they open up their mouth, they don't escape from examination. If they don't accept the declaration of God's existence through God's self-disclosure, anything they say can and will be used against them. Even if they say, I'm unconvinced.
Oh.
And you can show them that just simply stating I'm unconvinced is a de facto, indirect, implicit denial of the existence of God. And so the only way, if they say, well, you're shifting the burden of proof, just say, well, wait a minute. Are you saying that I'm shifting the burden of proof, that you therefore reject the claim? You don't accept it? You lack belief? And if they say yes, say, good. What you have just stated is in an implicit counterclaim. And if somebody makes either an explicit or an implicit counterclaim, guess who now has a burden? And then you have to start the discussion and show them you're not neutral. They are going to fight tooth and nail, dig in their heels. They'll, through hook or by crook, they're going to, through verbiage, misdirected, they're going to try to convince you that they're neutral. And you have to show them that they're not. Okay? Look, they are acquainted with the same facts that we are. Right? Now, they say, well, give me evidence. Well, you have the same evidence I do. And if you don't accept all of the facts in the world around you necessitating that there be a God so that there can be facts, the problem isn't that there is insufficient evidence. Everything is evidence for God. Okay? And if they go, that's ridiculous. Well, of course they're going to think it's ridiculous because they've already decided in their mind God doesn't exist. But then they'll go, oh, but I don't know. In other words, they believe that there's no God, but they know they can't defend it. So they just say, well, I don't know. But their position still entails the denial and falsity of God. So there's no shifting of a burden of proof. Now, here's a quick and easy way to blow them to smithereens. Make them recognize that the acknowledgement of God, that God is the universal, right? All facts are derived and depend upon God, okay? There isn't any fact that is unrelated, unconnected, and even facts that are related to each other, their very relatedness is God imposed because of He's creator. So when we talk about believing in God, we're believing in the ultimate universal God. So if they lack belief in that universal, then they're believing in another universal. Because if you don't have a universal in mind, then all you have are unrelated, unconnected facts and particulars that you cannot explain them, because everything would be unrelated. Right? Say, oh, no, these facts have a relationship. I just don't know what's ultimate. Good. What is it from the top down, metaphysically or ontologically, that imposes any relationship between particulars? Is it a universal? See, they can't answer this. So when they refuse to accept God, the universal, they're believing in the negation of the universal, which is another universal. But here's the problem. When we refuse to believe in God as the universal, then universals are inaccessible. They're unattainable. They're unattestable. They cannot be accounted for. How is an individual as a particular amongst a plethora of particulars in the cosmos? How are you going to determine what any universals? How? In a world without God and a specific type of God that has the property attributes of the Christian God, and through his providence, we could know that there are universals, including the ultimate universal himself. But without God, there could not be a way to know universals. So their lacking a belief in God is self-refuting. In a world without God, universals cannot be invoked and sustained. But their God denial is a universal. But their world can't provide for the sustaining of universals. So it's game over. One simple thing to keep in mind. They're not atheists because they've reasoned this out and they're truth seekers. Every single one of them are atheists because of one thing, just one thing. They do not want there to be a God. Now, they'll tell you otherwise. Oh, I would love to believe in God. I want to believe in God. I just don't have the evidence. That is hogwash. You say, really? You just want evidence for God? Yes, please show it to me. So in other words, you've decided that all the facts around you, ever since you've been a conscious being, do not necessitate referencing God. You've decided that? Yes. Good. How'd you determine that? And do you think I've ever gotten an intelligent answer to that question? I've asked literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of atheists that same question. Do you think I've ever gotten a decent answer to that question?
No.
No, not once. All I get is verbal subterfuge, verbal hand waving and misdirection. They want to retain their mental autonomy and sovereignty. And the acknowledgement of God is an existential threat to their personal mental autonomy. So they will make up anything in their head as to why there's no reason to believe in God, right? Let's say, well, I don't have a reason to believe in God. Oh, did you reason that? Oh, so how is reason plausible in a world where the ultimacy of reality is not a personal rational agent that imbues us with the capacity to reason? How does that work? Now, some of them will respond, well, it's an emergent property of evolution. But then you would just simply be saying the neurological processes that they call reason are just the cascading laws of cause and effect. But then it wouldn't be reason. But then it's even worse. It's because they cannot account for laws of nature, because those would be universals. So what they call reason are just chronological mental states. How are these chronological mental states in a time index, how are they related? How are they connected? What, because it's in a chronological sequence? Well, because I reasoned that it was. Well, good. Then how does that thought related to other ones? Just because you think it? Maybe that just popped into your head that it was connected to a previous thought. You see, in a world without God, what you have is chance is ultimate. In other words, what I mean is anything goes. And if anything goes, you can't sit there and say that there are laws. You can't even say the sky is blue. I encountered an atheist a couple of days ago who has been coached by other atheists who are more philosophically oriented. And he decided to dialogue with me on another server. And when I asked him a series of fair questions, does anyone in the room, and by the way, he had a decent amount of intelligence, does anyone think that he sincerely answered my simple questions? He just gave evasive responses, just nonstop evasive responses. Atheism is over. Once you understand the biblical perspective, okay, atheism is beyond burnt toast. Stick a fork in it. It's done. Okay? Does that mean there won't be atheists in the future? Of course there will, because these people will continue to be fools until Judgment Day. But atheism is over. It's dead. It's completely incoherent. Once we understand what God has said and we apply what he says, the ramifications and the implications to what the atheists say, they are nuked. It's over. Their words, you can take their responses and use it against them. Well, I don't have a reason to believe in God. Okay, what's your reason to believe that there is something ultimate that connects or relates any one particular to another in this world? What's your ultimate reason for that? Do you have a reason to believe that there's anything that connects and relates particulars in this world? No, they don't have a reason for that, but they believe it. So you say, oh, so you're violating your criterion of belief. You throw up this criterion of belief. I want evidence for God. But when it comes to the most important universal or ultimate or absolute that you must have to have a coherent worldview, you don't have a reason for it. So why do you believe it? Well, we know why. It's because they love their personal mental autonomy, and God is an existential threat to their autonomy. And so they will think and say anything that they think is intellectual, even though it's garbage.